Vishnu, Jay, and from AgZen, CEO of AgZen, and they've got an interesting product. And with all the talk of See and Spray, this is kind of a timely entry for them in the market because it's kind of two different paths of accomplishing a similar idea of saving us money. So and helping us out with logistics and less sprayer fills and whatnot, but kind of going about it two totally different ways. And like in the text message I sent, maybe we need to spray better before we spray less. And in some ways, a lot of ways, this system is telling us stuff that we couldn't have possibly have known before. We just co-op tells you this is the adjuvant you need, this is what you need to do. We tell you this is the nozzle you need because you tell me you want to go 15 miles an hour and you want to spray 15 gallon acre, so I tell you this is the nozzle you need. So this is what you're spraying. And as they found out, that's not always what you're getting out of the nozzle. It's not always what the chart says. And so, are we really doing as good a job as we think we are? We're not getting as good a coverage as we think we are. It may not be sticking. It may be getting coverage, but it's not sticking to the plant because the adjuvant's not doing its job. And so, Vishnu is going to go through a lot of that with you today and kind of explain how it works. So, thank you for coming.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin, and thanks to all of you guys for coming. I know dragged you out here in the morning, but hopefully it'll be informational and also useful. I know we already have some returning customers. Ty Brown from Drago is represented here, and
we printed out
some new customers as well.
We,
Kevin, Kurt, we've signed more people. So our capacity is 50, so we have 12 left. We're already working with 3 of the 5 major chemical companies. These guys also want our help to figure out how to make their chemistries better, because even they don't know how much liberty you need on water hemp versus lamb's quarter, and we're helping them figure that out. We're at one of the dealers today. Kevin is one of our dealers, but we have 5 across the U.S. And 2 retailers have also signed up to use our product on their custom application acres. Now, why am I telling you this, right? Kevin mentioned See and Spray. It took John Deere 8 years and their infinite marketing budget to get to 1 million acres last year in 2024. We're at 870,000 in our second commercial year. I just wanted to give you that context of how quickly we're growing, how much growers are buying into it, because we're giving, we're answering very, very obvious questions that you guys have all had for a very long time. So now that I've given you sort of the company that you could potentially buy into, an overview of that, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we're actually optimizing every drop of pesticide that you're putting out, right? And it all stems from the fact that foliar spraying is incredibly complex. So how many of you guys do your own spraying? Perfect. So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So every time you go out there, you're working on this, multivariable problem, right? You're trying to think about your machine parameters, your chemistries, your adjuvants, your nozzles. Even the weather influences how well your chemicals work, right? But underneath it all, what you're doing is taking chemicals, you're mixing it in water, and you're spraying this onto what are fundamentally water repellent things, the leaves, right? And it turned out when we got started in this space, what we found is, despite how important it is, it basically underpins how all your chemistry is making it onto the plant. That interface between the droplet and the leaf hadn't even been measured, let alone optimized in the fields before, right? And that was the gap that we wanted to fill. And I want to tell you why we're the perfect people to do it, right? So, a bit of background on me. I grew up in southern India on my family's 11-acre farm. So our family grows coconuts, mangoes, and rice. And as I was growing up, I used to have a backpack sprayer and spray the rice fields and the mango trees. And I never want anything to do with farming because let me tell you, spraying trees with a backpack sprayer sucks, right? Because I'm just over there and it's just like all spraying back on top of me. But then fast forward about a decade and a half, I got to graduate school at MIT. I got my master's and PhD from there, where I spent 6.5 years along with our co-founders studying how to optimize sprays and how to optimize droplet leaf interactions. So I'm just giving you that background to tell you that there's a pervasive problem and we have the expertise to solve it. And now I'm going to show you why that interface is so important, right? Because in that same field, when you zoom in, this is what spraying looks like. Even with the best adjuvants and nozzles, if you zoom into that plant interface, this is what you're seeing. First off, not everything you spray gets on the plant because of drift. And then of the stuff that gets on there, lot of it's bouncing off because it's fundamentally water repellent, right? So the idea behind AgZen is, let's actually measure what's there, because that's what's doing the job, right? Not the gallons per acre. Let's measure what's on the plant, either help you keep that same amount or improve it based off of what you want, but then let's figure out ways to spray more efficiently, right? And the way I like to explain it is this. Let's say you mix up your tank and you go out in this hypothetical exercise, you're spraying 100 droplets, right? And of these 100 droplets, you know, there's drift, it's taken a bunch away, there's the stuff bouncing off. So of the 100 you sprayed, only 20 of them stayed on the plants, right? Be it the weeds or the crop. AgZen's the only company in the world that first off tells you you have 20 droplets on your plant. Nobody else does that. Not John Deere, not Case, nobody. And then on top of that, we tell you, hey, you're spraying 100 to get 20. Can you spray 50 and still get 20 or more on the plant? That's where the savings comes from, right? So every droplet has the same amount of chemical in it because you mix the tank up the same way, right? You're not changing that. We're just making sure you're doing it more efficiently. So I want to make sure that that part of it makes sense to you guys, because that's kind of fundamental to how everything else is going to work and everything else I'm going to describe. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. I'm seeing a bunch of head nodding. So now I'm going to zoom out from this view on the droplet level and tell you what we do for spraying as a whole, right? So revisiting this very complex process that all of you guys are doing every day. Before we get there, most farms are spraying the same way that I used to with my backpack sprayer, right? You go out, you pick a set of these parameters like Kevin mentioned. Maybe you get a recommendation for a nozzle or an adjuvant or whatever it may be. You go out and you spray, and you have to pray for the outcomes you want in terms of your pest control, in terms of your weed control, your yield. So that's been the state of spraying for a very, very long time. The last 3 or 4 years, spot spraying has come along. These are systems like the John Deere See and Spray, which maybe some of you guys have heard of. But it's not closing the loop. In fact, a lot of the OEMs are working with us because they want our help to tell them how many of the weeds are they hitting, how many of the weeds are they missing, what kind of coverage you're actually getting on the weed, because they don't. All they're doing is telling a nozzle when to turn on and off, right? And instead of doing that, what we wanted to do is tell you guys what to do with your sprayer when it's actually on, right? Give you that real-time feedback control that lets you control your cost and your outcome, right? And so this is what spraying looks like now. We introduced this measurement step, which is product we're going to talk about, RealCoverage. We integrate all our expertise into it to help you pick these input parameters so that you're getting the outcomes that you want on the field. And I'm going to talk a little bit about enhanced coverage too. Brian Gross, one of our early adopters, is getting one of these this year, but it'll be available for wider purchase next year. But we're going to talk about RealCoverage a lot today. So I've talked a lot. You should recognize this unit. It's actually ties. But as you're going through the field, what our unit's doing is it's bolted onto the sprayer, and as you're going through the field, it's picking up all the droplets that are on your leaves, be it the crop or the weed. In this case, it's looking on the crop. Even when you're going 18 miles an hour, we could see 150 micron droplets up to 3 feet into the canopy, right? And you don't use any dyes or tracers, it's just seeing water, right? And as you're going through the field, it doesn't just stop at measurement. This is actually a screen recording from Ty's unit, where what we're then doing is giving you recommendations on what to do with your speed, your GPA, your boom height, your droplet size. At the beginning of every spray, we're helping you pick the right nozzle and the right adjuvant, right? How many of you guys have been approached by an adjuvant salesman to say, hey, I want to sell you my adjuvant? Pretty much everyone? Well, we're going to tell you how to actually pick that rather than just trusting them at their word, right? But I want to give you this one slide overview on what this all looks like, and we're going to dive into detail here on what plant level management looks like with us and how we're helping folks actually make decisions, right? So let's say you guys want one. What's going to happen is we're going to come on, it doesn't matter what kind of sprayer you have, we're going to come on and bolt it on in about 4 hours, right? So this is another neighbor of yours, the Hagemans, so this is their unit. Where we go in there, we bolt it on in about 4 hours. As you can see, there's 2 sensor stacks, one that's measuring stuff before your boom goes through, one that's measuring it right after. There's a compute unit and a tablet in the cab, and we hook up to the battery. Last year we did this all ourselves. This year we have Kevin and other dealers to help us do this. But essentially, you can see what time it is outside right there. But basically you park it up at night, we're gonna do it very, very quickly, and you're gonna have your sprayer back, right? And what it's doing is essentially taking that picture before your sprayer moves through so that we can look at your plants, and we're not counting dew as coverage or something like that. We're just looking at whatever you put on, and we're quantifying what kind of coverage you got. And once you have this picture, you could do a hell of a lot, right? So this is on average what we did across all of our customers last year, which is increase the number of droplets or the amount of product per leaf by almost double, right? So 90%. So think about what that means. You guys have, I'm sure you guys have it, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Water hemp issues, disease control issues. Now think about that water hemp problem, and imagine that I could get you double the amount of product on every water hemp leaf without having you change the GPA or the ounces per acre you're putting out. That's what we did already, right? So then once you get there, now you can cut back to the level that you're at now, if you're happy with that level of control. So that's where the savings come from. I'm gonna show you examples, right? But I wanna give you an idea of everything that our operators and our customers changed based off of our recommendations, right? They changed nozzles, pressures, spray speeds, boom height. 80% of them switched adjuvants or tried adjuvants for the first time. 20% of them even tried new actives because of us. Because it turns out that people make all sorts of competing claims even for actives, but no one's actually measured or controlled coverage before. So we had people switch from Belaro to Veltima as an example, because once you actually normalize the coverage, the Veltima did better. And when you didn't do that, it was kind of a pick-me between the two. But that's kind of an overview of everything that you could change with our system. I'm going to dive into some specific examples now, tell you what the system's actually doing as it's going through the field, right? So this is a case of a customer in Illinois where we helped them optimize their fungicide spray. So what this table is showing you is they turned the unit on, they started driving. In about 30 seconds to a minute, it's measured coverage on hundreds of leaves, and it's telling you, hey, about 97.5% of your leaves are more than 5% covered in whatever you sprayed. There's nothing that's more than 50% covered. And we're figuring out what kind of settings you're using, so that's the setting as well, right? So they were spraying extra force droplets, they had exact apply on this, at 18 inches, 15 GPA, right? And this grower, they didn't have any other tips that day, they didn't have any other adjuvants on hand, and they didn't want to drive faster or slower. So all we could do for them is tell them what's the right pressure to spray at. I'm going to show you all the other examples too, but I want to start here, right? And in about 20 minutes, they just varied this, right? They went from where they were, and we were like, hey, you need to get here. And so they tried to get there with their pressures and try to get to the right droplet size. And in 20 minutes, what they were able to find is two different types of settings, right? One that gave them 20% savings. So I'm going to ask you guys to look at that top row and that fourth row and compare number by number of what the coverage looked like. It's basically the same, but instead of spraying 15 GPA, they're not spraying 12, right? And so that's spraying 20% less while getting the same amount of product on the leaves. The second setting that they found was to give them drastically better coverage on the spray. They're still spraying 15 GPA here, but this is what Kevin was talking about in terms of getting better and being able to cut the rate, not just having one way to give you guys back return, right? But if you compare the number of leaves that have more than 30% coverage on them, they went from 14.4 to 45, right? So they drastically made the amount of product on their leaves better just by optimizing one thing, right? What kind of pressure you're spraying at. And in terms of what it actually looks like in the cab, I showed you that recommendation view. This is another view you could flip to where you go out and you spray and you set a target. That target is basically going to turn that table I showed you into this bar right here, just telling you what percentage coverage you're getting. And all your operator has to do is make this green go higher, right? So that's all they need to do. They can play with whatever they want, and as long as they're doing that, that means you're getting better coverage than what you used to have. So that's how simple we make it. Now I showed you fungicide. I'm going to show you results from another one of your neighbors, Brian Brose, and show you what we were able to do for him on his Liberty Pass, right? So basically, we're measuring coverage on Liberty. This is a plot that's showing you what the coverage was on the weeds that we saw. So this is not on the crop, it's just on the weeds. The way you read this chart is there's no weed leaves that have 40% coverage. There's a lot of weed leaves that have low coverage, right? And so just translating that into numbers, I put that up there where on Brian's field, before they turned our system on and actually listened to our recommendations, only 11% of their weed leaves had more than 15% coverage, right? And you guys have probably all heard this, but apparently for Liberty, you need a lot of good coverage, right? That's what you guys have heard. Well, I'll tell you first of all, BASF doesn't actually know how much coverage they need. They're actually working with us to help them figure it out. But let's just say, hey, okay, you need good coverage, right? And so our recommendation to Brian and Tyler was that, hey, your adjuvant isn't working. A lot of stuff is bouncing off. You're spraying 20 gallons an acre, but you're getting very low coverage. So switch your adjuvant. So then Tyler went out. I don't know if you know who this is, but it's Brian's operator. He got 6 different types of adjuvants, tried them all in the tank, and he found one that gave him drastically better coverage, right? So instead of only getting 11% of your weeds above 15% coverage, that number almost tripled to now 28% of your weed leaves have more than 15% coverage. Went from 30% above 10% coverage to 50%. So almost doubled that as well, right? So now he's still spraying 20 GPA. The only thing they changed was what adjuvant they used, right? And then keeping the tank mix the same way, they didn't cut the rate to 15 GPA. And what's cool is that they're still getting way better coverage than what they used to, so more product in every water hemp plant. But instead of spraying 20 GPA, they're spraying 15. So as soon as this spray was done on June 21st, Brian called me and bought the unit right away. And that's because you're going from 20 GPA to 15, that's 25% less volume, that's less time refilling, that's less money that he's paying the operator, and he's going from 32 ounces an acre of Liberty to 24. Because why does that matter? I could take 40 ounces of Liberty, dump it all in the soil, and I haven't done anything, right? And so instead of that, I'm taking 24 ounces, getting more on every weed leaf that you have in that field, and I'm spraying less to get there. So that's one example. I showed you a pressure example of how they optimize that. Yeah, yes sir.
Oh, my question on adjuvant then.
Yeah.
Do you think it's changing on how it's coming out of the nozzle?
No,
Or
it's
is it
changing on
how it splatters on the leaf?
Exactly. You remember that picture I showed you of stuff bouncing off?
Right.
Not every adjuvant works the same way. Stuff makes droplets stick better. Some stuff makes it stick worse. There's 1,000 different adjuvants. There's literally 1,000. So Purdue publishes a list. It's about 1,200 adjuvants that are on the market. No one's ever actually compared them to figure out how much is actually sticking. And let me tell you, from last year, those 7 guys we worked with, a lot of them did this. Like 80% of the adjuvants we saw did nothing. And then, but there's 20% that do a lot, kind of like this one. So this is a tool that helps you pick that, right? And helps you figure out, how do we stop these droplets from bouncing off and actually stay on the plant? And this is giving you a measurement of what's actually there, right? It's not telling you like what came out of the nozzle, it's telling you what's on the plant. Help you make that decision, right?
Are you going to mention, I don't know what you guys talked about, the difference between the two, between corn and soybeans that guy found?
Which part of it?
Where he found a different adjuvant worked better.
Oh yeah, so, I mean, I'll tell you right now. So, trademark, it worked for Tyler and Brian Bros. The same adjuvant didn't work for the Hagemans. Why? Because your water's different. Adjuvants interact with the hard ions in your water, the same as your tank mixes as well. So they had to find a different one. And then that was the case all the time. So one recommendation, just because you see trademark here, you go and try it out, doesn't mean it's going to work.
Well, then you mentioned the guy in Iowa who found that the adjuvant that worked well for his corn spray
Yep.
did not work. It was like, oh, we'll just use it for the bean spray. Well, they found out that adjuvant wasn't the optimal one for the bean spray.
That's right. And the idea behind this is every time you're changing your tank mix, you're spraying a new combination of chemical, and you're hoping that that thing sticks on the plant. And adjuvant's a big part of that, right? To get it to actually stick on the plant. Because again, remember, you're spraying water onto water repellent things. What we're doing is giving you that ability to choose the right adjuvant and the right nozzle and the right settings, and actually have a measurement to base your decisions off of, right? Yes, sir.
Did you do any comparison when you went from 20 gallon per acre down to 15 in terms of weed kill efficiency?
Yeah, they did, and they're doing it on all their 5,000 acres, and I'll show you trial data that backs that up as well. So Yeah, basically, what matters is what's on the plan. I'm going to show you the pros and cons of just willy-nilly cutting rate as well, and then actually cutting rate while maintaining coverage. So I'm going to show you both of those. Yeah.
How did they cut the rate? Was it with pressure? Was it with speed, or what?
Yeah, with GPA, because they just have a rate controller, and they just cut that rate from 20 to 15.
Right.
So they're not driving faster. It's
Right,
just
same
with their-
speed, okay.
Same speed.
But they, the same tank mix.
Same tank mix.
Okay.
Again, every droplet has the same amount of chemical. All you're doing is making more stick on the plant, and so you could go from 20 to 15, cover more acres, save money, but more's on the plant.
So did cutting the pressure then maximize the droplet size?
So it's not always about. So let's say you have an exact apply unit. Let's say, in that case, you don't have to cut pressure, right? You keep the same pressure, and you just change the duty cycle, and you're getting a lower rate, right? Let's say in another case, you cut the rate by cutting pressure. Now your droplet size is unoptimal. This will tell you that, hey, you shouldn't be at a 006 nozzle. You should actually be at a 004, so that you could actually be at the right pressure. So you're getting the droplet size you want at the right rate. And all this is doing is giving you that information. Yeah.
It's not physically changing anything in the.
No, so I'll describe that a little bit for you. Most of our customers are like, hey, put me in like my operator, I want them to be in charge of what decisions you're gonna make. We'll give you all the recommendations, but your operator's in charge. Yes, sir.
Will different weather conditions change the way those adjuvants
Yeah.
work? Because
Yeah.
what I was thinking about is, so if your humidity changes, any of that stuff changes, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden what worked one day,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm gonna show you what we're doing for that.
right.
Yeah. No, but that's a great question. I'll preempt it. Your coverage can vary 30 to 40% just because of weather conditions. So I showed you pressure, I showed you adjuvant. Here's a nozzle switch where just going, from one nozzle to another, you're getting drastically better coverage, which works for that day, for that given tank mix, right? Because it's a non-windy day. You can go to a medium droplet. You can go from the LDM nozzle that Deere sells to the Gardiner Twin that Deere also sells. And you get way better coverage on your plant, right? And it's not always that we're telling you, hey, go low and slow, right? We've also helped customers drive faster. But the difference is we tell you how much faster you can go without compromising your quality, right? So we helped this customer go from 8 mile an hour to 10 miles an hour, told them, hey, your coverage is still the same. So you can afford to go there. But when they went to 12, it started to drop off. So we said, hey, you went too far, right? But that's another thing that we do for you. So I just gave you 4 different examples: pressure, adjuvant, nozzle, speed, right, of what we can do. And I'll tell you how that all works together in a program. This is a 4-spray program that one of our customers in Iowa had. But it's just really useful to communicate that we can help you optimize pretty much every spray you're doing, right? So we helped them cut rate and GPA on 13 of the 15 chemicals they sprayed that year. This is where we're very, very different from See and Spray, right? Because unless you have the 2-tank system, which costs $200,000, you can only use it on this post-2 spray, which is only going on the plant, right? Versus us, you could use it for everything. And I'm going to tell you how we deal with residuals, right? With that post-1 example. So before we got there, 15 GPA, they're spraying full rate on all their chemicals. They're doing 150 refills, 600 acres a day, right? And by the time they were done with that pass, this is what they were getting to. So 30 to 50% less cost on everything that's blue. Went from 150 refills to 100. Went from 600 acres a day to 1,000. Because most of your time, guys, is lost refill. It's not, you going 2 miles an hour faster is not going to do anything. It's a refills, right? And all they did to make sure they're getting the Anthem Max they need is put a safety factor on it. So the way this worked is they just mixed up 5 ounces an acre of Anthem Max. They defined a minimum cut of saying, we're only going to cut it by 30%. And so when you cut from 5 to 30%, you're still getting 3.5 ounces, right? Because we can measure what's on the soil, but nothing's bouncing off the soil. So we're not telling you to adapt based off of that. And the cool thing is, in that tank mix, Anthem Max is one of the cheaper things in that tank mix. So now you're saving money on everything that's going on the plant. You're still getting the residual on the soil that you want, and you're optimizing your spray as you're going through the field. So that's what we did for one of our customers in Iowa. So now I'm going to tell you some more trial data, right? You asked about what happened and how we can optimize things. So I'm going to give you some different examples, because this will also help you guys think about what this can do for you on your farm, right? So this plot is going to show you how much product is on the plant, which in general is proportional to the level of pest control and disease that you can disease control you can achieve. And on the x-axis is how much money you're spending per acre, right? And typically, this graph looks like this. First of all, you have no idea where you're on in this graph if you didn't have a real coverage unit. But once you have it, you can actually know where you are. And most customers that we get to, because the labels are written the way they are, because no one's actually measured this, you know, they're represented by this light blue diamond, right? And the first thing we could do is we turn the system on, we find all the spray settings, right, that are happening in real time. Your pressure, your speed, all of these things that, or your boom height, all of these things that you can adapt in real time, help you get the same amount of product on the plant, but you're not spraying less to get there. And then the next thing we do is start to optimize your droplet. Now we're talking about changing your adjuvant, changing your nozzle, making more of it stick onto the plant. So now you can get more to stick while you're spraying less. This is exactly what we did for Brian, right, on that Liberty spray. Because now you can open up a much, different level of outcomes, right? So you could either just maximize your savings, where you're saying, hey, I'm happy with the level of control I'm getting, so I just want the same amount on the plant, but I just want to maximize my savings, so you could go that way. Or you could go to point number 3, which is you're getting better coverage than what you had before. You're compromising a little bit on the savings. And that's point 3 is where Brian got to with his Liberty spray, right? Because we got him better coverage, went from 20 GPA to 15. So he could have gone even further, but he didn't because he wanted to still get better coverage on the speeds. But I'm going to show you some trial data for each of these things of how we got to, how each of these points we could go to, right? So number 1, this is a trial we did with Cornell, Liberty, and Enlist, where we said, okay, let's go from 20 gallons an acre to 14. Let's go from 32 ounces an acre to 22.4, and be careful to just maintain coverage as we're going down, right? So all we're doing is making sure the same amount's on the plant. We see, okay, yeah, the level of control on foxtail lamb's quarter is the same if you're careful about it. Now let's unlock more things, see if we can go even further. And now I'm going to show you what happens if you just cut the rate willy-nilly, right? So this is a trial we did with Texas A&M on cotton defoliation. So just in case you guys aren't familiar with cotton, you have to defoliate it before the harvester goes through, because otherwise all the leaves are going to get caught up in the cotton, and you're going to lose quality. And so they basically spray a herbicide on cotton to get the leaves to fall off, right? And what we did in this case is we sprayed in 2 ways. One with our system off and just cutting the rate willy-nilly, and in another case where we were careful to maintain coverage as we cut the rate. So with it off is orange, and with it on is in blue. So you can basically see that we can maintain 90% efficiency if we're actually careful to keep the same amount on the plants as you're cutting the rate. If you're not, you're obviously going to lose out, right? Because you're getting less product on the plant, so then you're losing out on defoliation effectiveness. And then here's another case where we got to this middle ground. I showed you on Brian's farm, but I'm going to show you another example on a very rigorous agronomic study where this is fungal disease control. The way you read this chart is higher the number, the more the disease. And we just tuned the system to give better coverage at the same spray rate. So if you compare, in this case, the orange and the blue, we're getting lower disease when you're spraying at the same rate. And you can spray 33% less and still get to the same level of disease as they had before. And basically what we unlock is this blue triangle and give you the choice, go where you want to go. If you want to cut the rate, do that and get the same level of control, do that. If you want to keep the same rate, get better disease control, do that. All we're doing is giving you that measurement of what's actually on the plant and helping you decide, right? So this is everywhere we've been. We're mainly focused on corn, soybeans, and cotton, but we've been on all sorts of crops. We'll be expanding into wheat next year. We're collecting data on what wheat looks like right now. But we're not going to ask you to change your sprayer or not go at 18 miles. Like, we work where you guys operate already. So it's not like you have to wait for anything. And what's really cool is I'm going to show you, I showed you a lot about what's actually happening in the cab, right? Of all these adaptations, but I'm going to show you guys as owner-operators how you can get better on the entire field as well, right? So that's the level of information that we're getting. We're getting to know how much is on the weed, how much is on the crop. We're starting to quantify crop injury, things of that nature. But when you zoom in and look at a leaf, that's the kind of picture we're getting, right? So we can see which droplets landed there, which ones splattered. You see kind of the splatter pattern on these things. So we know exactly what was on the plant. Now this is to get to your question about environmental variability, right? Because once you have this picture, we build models like this one, where you take your initial deposition, and we actually predict how much your droplets spread out, how quickly they evaporated. We're also integrating diffusion so that we could say, hey, if you have these things on the tank, we'll look at trial data to figure out, okay, how long do these droplets need to stay there? Is it evaporating too quickly? And what we found last year is just due to the environment, wind speed, temperature, and humidity, coverage varies by 30 to 40%, steady state coverage, right? And we're accounting for that because we have an onboard temperature sensor, we have an onboard humidity sensor, we take data from your local weather station. We have Starlink on it, so we take data from that. And where this all goes into is a new generation of spray maps, right? So you guys probably familiar with JD Ops and Climate, where it told you where the sprayer drove, right? Am I right? Tells you, hey, yeah, I sprayed 15 GPA over here, sprayed 20 GPA over there, I had some gaps maybe on where I sprayed. Well, we're gonna go from that to something like this, where this platform is called Real Performance. All of you guys will get access to it. It's a website, you just log in. And for every one of your fields, as it's driving through, it's taking measurements, averaging 50 leaves to give you an idea of what kind of coverage you actually got. Not just did you spray there or not. It's gonna tell you, you could click on any one of these dots. We know what conditions you used, what the wind speed was, what the chemical rate was, and you could actually see what kind of coverage you got. So let's say you're spraying with an operator, and the operator wants to go fast and you want him to do a good job. You guys can both agree on what a good job means and how fast you can go, because you're both seeing this at the same time, right? And we also allow your agronomist on here. We allow them to upload pictures. So let's say they're walking the field and they're like, hey, I sprayed 15 GPA everywhere, but why do I have really bad disease control on this side and really good on this side? Well, now you know. And at the very least, we can eliminate it as a possibility, right? There might be 100 different reasons why something happened, but you can eliminate this one as a variability, and you'll actually know what you did, right? And oh, by the way, this view is what no one has in the industry, right? OEMs don't have it. It's crazy to me that chemical companies sell you guys chemicals without actually knowing this. But that's the state of where we are, and we'll fix it. But let me talk a little bit about your ROI, right? So I showed you guys a 4-spray program just earlier. This is just taking that 4-spray program and plugging it in for 5,000 acres and how much money they were spending, right? So $325K a year. The baseline thing we could do is help you cut the rate by 30%. That we've done across the board. We come to you, we'll help you find the right nozzles, the right adjuvants, the right settings to use. We cut that by 30% for sure. And so you take that number, take 30%, that's $98,000 a year in value at a minimum. I'm not even talking about yield improvements, weed control improvements, because I can't prove any of that to you guys. I have trial data to back it up. What I can prove is you spray 30% less and the same amount still on the plant. I could do that. So just doing that is $98K a year on 5,000 acres. So OEM math is to say, hey, give 1 year payback to the customer, and then you make your money on that, right? So we said, all right, we'll do it, but we'll actually put our money where our mouth is, right? So instead of just saying, hey, buy it all up front, which we'll still allow you to do if you want to do it, we said, hey, let's do it as a lease to own program. So basically you're paying us that $97,500, where you're doing it over 2 seasons, right? So you pay us first, $32,500, we come out, either Kevin or us come out and install the unit, you get to use it for a whole season. At the end of that first season, you've already figured out what the right adjuvants are, nozzles are. You're gonna get a lot of benefit from it at the end of that first season. But at the end of that, you get to decide, hey, do I wanna keep it? Or do I wanna give it up? Am I not getting the value? We gave that same choice to all of our customers last year, and folks like Ty said, yeah, we wanna keep it. We wanna come back. And then you pay $32,500 in September. You get to use it for a whole second season. And then you get to make that decision again at the end of that second season, do you want to keep it or not? You pay that last $32,500, you own the unit. There's no per acre fee, none of that stuff. There's a maintenance contract you'll sign with Kevin that says you pay him $5,000 a year so that he can come make sure that your unit's functioning properly, do preventive maintenance, and it covers your Starlink costs so that the website keeps working. So that's kind of the idea of how this all works. But what you get for basically a $32,500 investment is all of this stuff. You get the website, you get access to better adjuvants, nozzles, actual data on how your spraying is doing, and then you get to make these decisions as you're going through, right? So here's stuff that one of your neighbors, Brian, said about us and other farmers too. Essentially, we're a no-brainer for these guys that have already bought into it. And that's a big part of why we've been able to scale so quickly, even in we have no marketing budget in comparison to deer, right? I can't afford to put ads on TVs, but we've been growing super quickly because it's a no-brainer value proposition for you guys of, hey, probably a good idea to know how much is actually on your weed or on your crop. So now I want to give you an idea of what's coming next and why you should buy in right now, right? So this is where we're going. By 2028, I told you we're going to take what we do now and blow it out of the water, right? Why is that? It's because we're going towards sprayer autopilot, right? So I'm not going to make the sprayer drive itself. Like deer can figure that out, right? I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is for your operator that gets in the sprayer and drives it, I'm going to make it as easy as possible for them. I'm going to give you guys the confidence that we can control the parameters you want us to control. But beyond that, right now, we're setting your spray as the baseline for your farm, right? But who's to say that that's the right baseline? How do we know that, hey, water hemp needs 15% coverage versus shepherd's purse needs 20%? Nobody knows this. We're going to figure all of that out with extensive R&D work and from data from your farms, because every one of those 870,000 acres, we're seeing, okay, this guy got 20% coverage on his water hemp, this other guy got 15% on his, but the idea being, eventually we're going to know how much you actually need on every weed and how much you need on the crop for different tank mixes. And that's where we could start to say, hey, yeah, go for it.
You talk about different weeds needing different coverage.
Yeah.
Can it identify different weeds?
Yeah, we can. We're not going to sort of make any recommendations based off of that because your weed distributions can be different in every field. So what we do is take statistics. So we bunch crop leaves as one category, weed leaves as another category, and we're averaging it, right? Because right now we don't want to because our control is through the operator. Like as it's going right now, we're not saying, hey, yeah, like quickly adapt, you have more lamb's quarters here. But that's where we're going to, that exact thing you're talking about.
But it's going to group all the weeds into one category?
Into one category, but we know what they are. We know that this is one type of weed and a different type of weed. But when we're measuring coverage for you and we're reporting it, it's going to tell you this is the coverage on all the weeds that you saw. If you want us to tell you, because you have all the pictures, we'll tell you how many of weed A you had, weed B you had.
So if you had one certain weed escape,
you could know, hey, yeah, this didn't work for this weed. It did for the others.
Could it do a field report or something like that? Say you had this such and such weeds.
We do, but again, remember, we're not measuring the entire thing, right? So we could tell you for everything that we saw what we can do, and these are the kinds of things that we're still a startup. If you say, so one of the things Kevin told us to do was, hey, that map that I showed you of like what the actual settings were compared to and what kind of coverage you got. He also asked us, hey, can you put your recommendations up of what you recommended, what they actually had, so that you guys as owners can see, hey, did you listen to the recommendation or not? And we built that already. That's already in. So if whatever you guys want as a feature that you think would be useful, we're happy to build it in. Yeah.
So the recommendation, who do the recommendations come from? Are they
from the system? It's not from some.
Right. There's nobody
all
monitoring that.
No, it's literally your thing
your
is
program
automatically
tells
doing
us this nozzle, this adjuvant.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, I was just thinking through something. So you look at like, let's just say Liberty, you're running at 32 ounces an acre.
Yeah.
Okay, you're getting 5 drops on that plant, and
Yeah.
that's killing that water hemp or whatever. I'm just using that as a
Sure.
number. So basically, that thing's going to come in and say, okay, we can put 8 or 9 drops on that thing.
Yeah.
And then you can back off rate in correlation with the number more drops, and
Yep.
then you'll still get the same.
You get back to your 5 drops that has the same amount of product in every drop. So you're going to kill the weed the same because you still have 5 drops. Nothing changed.
Right.
But instead of spraying 20 GPA to get your 5 drops, you're spraying 15 or 10 to get your 5 drops.
I see.
And then we can help you get, let's say you're not getting enough killed, and you want more drops, and I got you to 10 from where you were at 5, I can give you, now I've opened up a space for you, right? So you go to 6, 7, 8, 9, that's your choice.
Okay, so is all that data then available to help decipher?
Yeah, that's what the platform is
The
doing.
platform actually tells you.
Yeah, exactly. So in real time in the cab, it's telling you, hey, go up or down on all of this stuff. But all the data is going onto the platform. You have a login. You log into any field. It's telling you what we recommended, what the actual coverage was.
Okay.
And then your agronomist can also log in, see what kind of weeds they got, upload pictures.
And then that's where it can tell you that you can cut back rate and get the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
You talked about boom height too. Did you have a graph on, you know, from high to low and?
Yeah,
and all
I
that?
mean, boom height is a touchy subject.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So first off, please calibrate your boom height controller, because most folks when they say, hey, I'm at 24, they're actually at like 32. And so first off, we measure our own boom height because we're looking at the plants, so we're taking pictures, so we know how to sort of triangulate the height. And with boom height, there's an optimum you want to get to. It's not that low is the best, because once you go too low, you're losing out on overlap. So based on your nozzle spacing, you want to get to an optimal boom height. So there's situations where you're like, hey, you're too low because you're losing out on 100% overlap. This is especially true for those of you who have PWM systems, because we did trials with PWM systems where how PWM systems work is adjacent nozzles turn on or off alternatively, right? So this nozzle's on at that same time, this one's off. That means the nozzle one over is the one that has to overlap with this one, right? Because this middle one's off, that one's on. That means to get 100% overlap, you actually need to be higher than what you were with a non-PWM system. And what that means is now you're more prone to drift, right? Because now you're more high, so now more opportunity for wind to take it off. So it's a touchy thing of like, okay, what's your optimal thing? Depends on, are you running PWM? Are you running 15-inch or 20-inch spacing or 10 inches? What kind of nozzle fan angle are you using? And what's the optimal for overlap that you get there? And then balancing all of that out with drift. You can see why it took me this long to explain it. This is why it's better to just have the system. So you could just like figure out what the right thing is, right?
So
Yeah.
with the PWM then, you know, it takes different tips than what boom would take, for
Yeah.
example.
Yep.
So does your recommendation specify a specific tip?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll ask you at the beginning of the season what your tank mix is. We're going to download all of that information. We're going to know what sprayer you have. We're going to see what kind of nozzles you want to get, right? And then based off of that, let's say you have the Exact Apply system. Let's just call it that way. Exact Apply, John Deere says, hey, yeah, you can't use just any willy-nilly tip. You have to use ours. So then we already have all of their tip charts downloaded. So then we'll tell you, hey, yeah, this is not doing well, go to a different thing, those kinds of stuff.
You'll have like spray systems or Williger or...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
specific.
So we'll ask you who's your supplier, and we'll just go onto their website and download it.
Okay.
So that's what we've done.
So the 325
Yeah.
micron or whatever you showed there,
Yeah.
you know, being optimal is less, necessarily not better than.
Yeah, so let's go back, right? So 325K, that was like the actual cost on 5,000 acres, and then we're saving you 98K. But you make the decision on what you want to do, right? Like, we have a customer that said, I'm never going to cut the rate. I'm going to keep it at 325K, but what I'm going to use your system for is to get better weed control, better disease control. And for me, I'm like, do whatever you want, man. Like, all I'm doing is giving you a measurement tool you've never had. I'm giving you recommendations. If you want to get better weed control, go for it. That's what we want to do. If you want to cut down your costs, do that. And that's kind of the cool thing about us is, and why I kind of disagree with the See and Spray approach is I never want to miss a weed. Because I know that a 5% weed escape means a way bigger yield hit than what you save by cutting the chemical by 30%. So my goal is get whatever coverage you want on the plant. We'll show you that you're getting it, and then we can optimize the way you want to optimize. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you showing that savings is like spraying 5,000 acres 4 times a year?
Yeah.
Or just once?
No, this is 4 times. This is their entire program.
Okay, well you showed sprayers spraying, you know, bare ground, you know, residual whatever.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the See and Spray do for bare ground?
See and Spray does nothing for bare ground.
Okay.
What we do,
Or not See and Spray, your
yeah. So
system.
what we do, I'm just gonna back up here a little bit, go back to that program. So yeah, this program, they even use this on the pre. Why do they use this on the pre? Because they have Roundup in the tank to kill whatever may have sprung up. Let's say you had a cover crop or you just let it fallow and now you have something. So for that Roundup that's in the tank, which you're also spending money for, we could tell you how to optimize that, right? Now, today, I'm not making any recommendations for your residual, but we could see it. We know how many droplets per square centimeter of ground got on the soil. We just don't know what to recommend to you because nothing's bouncing off of the soil, right? It's getting there and it's staying there. But how do you know that that current density is correct? How do you know that that droplet size is getting down through the soil and actually doing the job? Right now, I'm not recommending anything, but that's coming, right? We're gonna tell you, hey, actually for this, pre that you're putting on, you actually want a longer, percolation time into the soil, therefore spray this. All of that is data I don't have, so I'm not making recommendations, but we're collecting.
So I mean, we're all used to just, saying gallons per acre is what we're after, but now we're after droplets per leaf.
Exactly. Micro ounces per leaf, not gallons per acre. Get rid of that. Who cares, right? And I'll show you. I'll show you. Oh,
Micro
Spell it.
so I'm gonna skip forward and then skip back a little bit, but because I want to show you guys something.
The other thing to think about is Bayer and Corteva are not going to take a 40% haircut on gross sales with See and Spray. So what are our chemical costs going to be per gallon, per ounce in the future?
So your question, gallons per acre to micro ounces per leaf. I'm going to give you literally the first thing we did as a company. We went to a grower in Massachusetts because that's where we're at. They're a 109 acre mixed vegetable grower. So they grow all sorts of things. And we were like, okay, man, we don't believe that this gallon per acre thing makes sense. So let's go and test it, right? So we took one of his fungicide products, micronized sulfur. This is literally a copy paste from the label. The label says, hey, for beans and peas, which are on the same row, spray anywhere between 3 pounds an acre to 10 pounds an acre. That's a 3-fold rate increase. And spray 5 gallons of water or 60 gallons of water. And we were like, what are you talking about? How does that make any sense? Have you guys ever read your Liberty label where it says, when you're ground rigging, 20 GPA, but it's an airplane, 4 GPA, 1 GPA. I'm like, what? That makes no sense, right? Well, it turns out we went, put the same chemical in the same sprayer on the same day, sprayed both of these crops because he had them both in his fields. And what we saw was very obvious to us, right? Peas had way less on it than beans because peas are way more water repellent than beans. I'm just using vegetables here, but just take that and apply it to your weeds, right? Same concept. Why does your lamb's quarter going to have the same amount as your water hemp? Those are way different hydrophobicity, right? The amount droplets bounce off. But we sprayed 50 GPA in both of these cases. We got drastically different amounts of product on every leaf, right? So this is why we said gallons per acre doesn't matter. Let's start thinking about micro ounces per leaf. Let's start to optimize that because that's what you guys are spending your money on, rather than just dumping it all in the soil, right? So I'm going to go back now a few slides to that overview of kind of what's coming, right? So like I mentioned, autopilot's where we're going. We're going to get a whole lot better at knowing what you actually need on the plant, and that's where you're going to get all this benefit, right? And as we scale this benefit, our buy price is based off of how much we're saving you, right? So every year as we get better, that price went up from last year to this year. So Ty locked in a great deal because he took that risk first, right? And then as we keep going, we're going to keep getting better. As I go from 30% to 40%, now instead of saving you 98K a year, I'm saving you 130K a year. So that price is going to go up. So that's where you guys can lock in right now, get the price at where it is, 97.5, and unlock all this benefit going down the road, right? So I want to talk a little bit about two of our other products, just one slide overviews on each of these. So Brian is getting one of these systems this year. It'll be available for wider purchase the year after. But basically, it's a new generation of tips that are proprietary to us. This is what we make, and a direct injection system. And it takes coverage like what you see on the left, that you could get with a T-jet nozzle, and turn it into what you see on the right. And the way we do this is to change where your adjuvant is. So right now, your adjuvant, your surfactant, whatever it is that you're putting in, you're mixing it in the tank, right? And so you end up with droplets that look like this, where the adjuvant molecules are inside the bulk of the droplet. The problem with this is the way these things are supposed to prevent droplets from bouncing off is that they have to make it from here all the way out here in the 10 milliseconds that the droplet has before it bounces off. And that takes time to happen, and that's why adjuvants tend to fail. That's why in that video I showed you, even though there's adjuvants in the tank, stuff's still bouncing off. What we found is if you cloak the droplet in adjuvant, now the leaf is seeing a layer of pure adjuvant. So you can go from a bouncing droplet to a sticking droplet without changing your adjuvant or the rate of it, just changing where it is in that droplet. Now this is a more extensive install. If you have a 97 nozzle sprayer, we're saying we're going to switch all 97 nozzles out. We're going to add a second line. We're going to add a 2.5 gallon jerry can for your adjuvant that's going to direct inject it into every nozzle, right? But what it can do for you is RealCoverage already doubles the average coverage that you're getting. This will take that and double it again. So in that same example you talked about, where you're getting 5, we can get you to 10, this will get you to 20, right? But we know it's a more extensive install, so we're saying, hey, try out RealCoverage, start thinking about microounces per leaf, see all the benefits we can give you, and once you're fully bought in, we'll talk about this later, right? And we're doing the same thing for fertilizer sprayers as well. So Real Nutrition is the product here, where I'm sure you guys do spreading on your fields? Yes, sir.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, but this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like, right? And you think you're getting 100 pounds an acre of whatever you're doing, but turns out you go out and measure it, this is actually what you're getting. You're not actually getting 100 pounds an acre. In some spots, you're getting like 60 pounds an acre. And oh, by the way, you're actually supposed to do a pan test every time you change rates. And your variable rate machine can't be set up the same way when it's spraying 400 pounds an acre or 50 pounds an acre. But no one's ever given you guys a tool to do anything about any of that, right? Who's going to put out 50 pans and do this test, every time you're changing? So instead what we did is took the same software that we built to see droplets on leaves, we put it on a drone that flies behind the sprayer. So then we take this picture and we quantify how much is actually on every square centimeter of soil. And then we could tell you what to do in your spreader, because that's known. If you know what pattern you have, fixing it is actually really easy. Because you just have to adapt your vane angles, your RPM, your hopper height, all of those things for that thing that you're spreading. And so we tell you what to do. We can get a more uniform pattern, actually get all the nutrition on it that you're paying for. And I know that a lot of you guys, if you use a retailer, tell them, hey, I'm paying you for all of this. Do this to actually prove that you're getting the product on the soil, right? So this again, Tyler actually, Brian Bros operator, is leasing one of these this year. And we have another retailer as well doing it, but it'll be available for wider purchase next year. So bringing it back to RealCoverage, the system that you guys can get and use, right? So if you guys want, I have lease-to-own term sheets right here. We could get it to you guys this season. So this is not, next year or something like that. We could put it on before April, right? Like March, early April, we could put it on your sprayer. What you would do is you'd sign one of these term sheets, describe exactly what I talked about. Either, most likely for the guys in this room, Kevin and his team are gonna install the unit for you. But we'll be on hand as well to train your operators, right? So we wanna transfer this knowledge we've gotten over the last 3 years as a company, all the stuff I learned during my master's and PhD, to your operators, right? In a digestible way of, hey, this is what we've seen with adjuvant changes, droplet changes, here's what we could do. You'll own the unit with 3 payments, right? And if you buy it early, you get a 10% discount. So this is why Brian bought it, because he was like, I see the value, I'm just gonna take the 10% discount right now. So that's everything I have for you guys. And now we'll open it up.
Well, one thing about the monitor, you guys can remote in and
Yes, sir.
ask questions, and we can, there's some in-cab diagnostics built into the system, so that it's not just you're not trying to get hold of us, you're not trying to call Boston. They can actually remote in and see the data.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of times where we'll just get warnings where if you're at you know, you're normally at 20% and you're suddenly at 4%, it'll flag in our internal system that, hey, this guy's at 4%. We'll automatically send you and your operator a text saying, hey, you're off, if you want us to do that. Or we'll call you if it's consistently low and we're monitoring it, because all of this is going into a dashboard where we can monitor all 50 units simultaneously, where if stuff's going wrong, we'll tell you. Yes, sir.
So like, let's just say, you know, like I have a miller now.
Yep.
And then like maybe a couple years from now or a year from now, I want to switch to a Hagee. I mean, that's
Included.
It can easily be.
Included. So it takes about 30 minutes to take off,
Okay.
4 hours to put onto your new sprayer. Just park it up. We'll do it for you.
Basically, it's just a different set of brackets and out the cannon.
Yeah.
And we move everything.
And they have a great shop, so we can make whatever bracket you want.
Does it make a difference, front boom or rear boom?
No, we put it on both.
How about dust and stuff?
So yeah, that was a big part of what we adapted and improved. So now we have a windshield wiper with wiper fluid, cleaning off both the lights and the cameras. You'd have to replace it as the windshield wiper fluid runs out, but just go to your gas station and get that. Wiper, you could get it from CarMax. We'll tell you what inch size wiper to buy, but that keeps it clean.
How about you know, if you guys change your system and whatnot, we have to upgrade hardware, or is it just a software?
Yeah, no, so this is a thing that we still recognize we're early, right? But we've already improved our hardware to a massive extent. So all these upgrades I'm talking about, that future plan, most of that is just software. You guys are already signing a license to get this. You're not paying anything to us for the software license. You're getting it, but you're just licensing it, so you'll get all of that. And by the way, so for example, for Ty, if we make, and this is a commitment for me, and it's also in the lease, if we're like, hey, we're making a massive improvement, and this is available, for Ty, we're doing all of that right now, because they took the risk early, right? So that's a conversation between you and I to do that, and we'll eat it. We're not gonna tell Kevin, hey, like he has to do it. We'll eat that. If that happens, that's not gonna happen, but if it does, that's the.
Because you went from, ours is like a desktop computer. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Pretty
So-
massive. compared
Exactly.
to-
So from that, we're going into a very small computer because they took the risk, you know, when we were 7. Now we're at 38, we're going to 50, so it's a way different deal. Yes, sir.
Can you adapt it to a drone?
We can, but we won't. So a couple of reasons for that. One, we did some drone testing with another startup company in Boston. We just know that the coverage is garbage, honestly, that you get from drones in comparison to what you get from ground rigs. Number two, most of our customers haven't really made that switch yet to go from ground rig to a drone. But yeah, I just fundamentally disagree that you have a label that says 1 GPA or 20 GPA. That's BS, I'll be honest with you.
I'm
So,
just thinking like more, not necessarily, more from the fungicide aspect
Yeah.
with a drone.
Yeah.
You know, that could lower gallonage, but
Yeah.
it would allow us to really fine tune how much of that is.
Yeah, and the reason we haven't really pushed hard on the drone front is because we just know you're getting 10x worse coverage from from a drone than you're getting from your Hagee. So my whole thing is give you guys an idea of how much you're actually getting on the plant. I'm not going to recommend a platform that just had 10x less product on the leaf compared to what you have now. So that's kind of why we haven't gone there. We know we can do it, but that's not been a big priority for us.
So do you think, like John sells for Bex, and they've done some PFR stuff, right? And the drones have kind of shown a little bit better. But is that, you think a lot of that, I don't know how much you've seen, but do you think that's more from they're just not running over as much crop? They're not running over the crop with the sprayer, so that's where the gain is really coming from?
Yeah, either that or the scarier answer, which is actually true, is you don't actually need that much on the plant. Because no one actually knows how much you need on the plant. Chemical company, which we're talking to them, they're like, can you help us figure it out? And I'm like, how the hell are you selling billions of dollars of this without you knowing? Because we went to them to get the recommendation on how much do you need on different weeds. Can you tell us so we can tell your customers? They'll get better results from your product, and therefore they'll stick with you guys. So it's a win-win. And they're like, we have no idea. Can you help us figure it out? I'm like, what? What is that even? That didn't even compute for me. But yeah, the scarier answer is you probably don't need anywhere near 20 GPA or 10 droplets. Maybe some of these work with even 1 droplet on a leaf. But We don't know the answer to that. That's what we'll figure out. Yes, sir. Oh, there's two, but
We were going back to the residuals.
yeah.
Can we use the system and run a direct injection just for residual to keep that at more constant as the
Yeah, you can.
changing?
You can, yeah, but it depends on what your actual. We'll plug into isobus and know what you're doing with your sprayer, but really depends on how you're doing your direct injection, how you're doing your safety factors. So in that case, they didn't have direct injection, so they were just like, hey, we're just going to put a safety factor, cut the rate back, right? But you could go about that in any way you want, where you're just telling us to control the stuff coming from your main tank, which is all the stuff that's going on the plant. You're controlling the rate of that, and then independent to all of that, your secondary tank is just putting out the amount of residual you need, right? The challenge is you're adapting GPA, right? Because we have your tank mixed the same way. The way you're getting the rate cut is to go from 20 to 15. So your rate controller for that secondary tank has to scale up in the concentration it's putting in. So we could program that in. That's not a hard thing, but that's the way you would do it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes, sir.
We're spraying tall corn, tassel height corn.
Yeah,
The boom's on the back of the machine.
yeah.
The
So
camera's not gonna work where it's sitting.
yeah. So I'll tell you what we did. So with Ty's unit, we sprayed corn with his rear mount sprayer. We sprayed corn with this. It will work depending on is your leaves, are your crops completely bending over? So if they're bending over, we say, hey, we don't work there anymore. Because the way this system works is picking up the same leaves on the front and the back. So depending on what you're actually putting on, when you're doing it, whether you're a week V4 guy or end of season guy, I don't know what your program is, but as long as we could see the same leaves on the front and the back, we could do it. That tends to get
The machine, it's bending.
exactly. If the machine is bending it, we can't do it, but that will be upfront with what it can and can't do. But even without that, take your corn program. Let's say you're doing 3 sprays, one of them's a fungicide. We can still help you with the other 2. And when we ask, hey, what's the most important spray of your season? Most people say it's the herbicide pass. It's the stuff that's going on the leaves. That post one where you're trying to knock all. We can help you with all of that. Yes, sir.
Expect to see how this unit.
So we're building it for 5 years, but we're a 3-year-old company. So let me talk a little bit about the warranty and management and everything. So the first year, pretty much everything's covered. We eat that, like let's say something happens to it, we're gonna cover all of it. Every year after that, like I mentioned, you're paying Kevin a maintenance fee, so that's covering normal wear and tear, things of that nature, keep the unit running. Now, if you drive the system into something and break it off, that's kind of on you. But everything other than that, we'll cover.
He mentions that because somebody did that.
Yeah, but that's kind of what we're building it for. Yes, sir.
So the 5,000 a year to Kevin, that's year to year to year to be able to use the thing?
Yeah, that's just so that he can afford to send people out, make sure it's still working. Let's say, yeah, like maybe like some component wore out. He'll tell us, hey, this component's worn out. He has inventory here. He'll make sure to switch all of that. But it costs him money to do that, right? Like he has to send a guy out to you, stuff like that. But that's going to him. You're not paying us, you're paying him.
If we don't pay him, is there a switch they turn everything off? Or what?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I'll turn everything off. Because that's my guy right there. So yeah, if he's not getting paid, I'm not getting
But
paid.
if we're getting paid that, we're gonna be calling and get scheduling stuff like, this isn't gonna be just, well, if you don't call us to come out and do something, we're not gonna.
No, this is preventative.
It'll be preventative, scheduled. It's gonna, it's gonna come out, we're gonna come out, it's gonna happen,
That's right.
type of thing, so.
It works in corn though too. Small
Yep.
corn.
Yep,
You
doesn't
never
matter.
showed anything on corn, just.
Well, we showed you that. I showed you one picture from it, but yeah, it's corn, beans, cotton, whatever you want. It just can't hit the system. As long as you're doing it on low stuff, totally fine.
They, I don't farm as big. I don't spray as many acres. And I
Yep.
do beans twice post and corn once post, so I won't be. My payback's going to be probably 12 years rather than.
Well, I don't know what acreage it is, but we could actually do the math and figure it out. But what we do is give you that ability to say, hey, yeah, can I get better control? Can I get the same with lower amounts? So our smallest grower is 2,200 acres. Our largest one is 130,000. So no matter where you are, we can help.
So back to the fungicide thing. So obviously you're gonna work on fungicide for beans.
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah.
But on the corn end of stuff, I mean, that's still pretty valuable. Is there any way that you can even kind of develop a baseline or something you can try to gather some
so
information?
you could get so until, on Ty's unit, until the stuff was hitting it and bending over massively, we are still measuring coverage. Still helping you get that, seeing 3 feet into the canopy. We even have experimental units where we put a partition down there, so we're parting the corn, so we're seeing the same thing front and back. That's sort of in the pipeline of stuff that can happen. Right now, the unit that you can get this year, if your boom is hitting it and it's bending over, we can't measure coverage on it. But we can give you if you're doing it before then, because we had a lot of customers spray before the corn got to that point. So the benefit there is you spray at that point, you still figure out what's your best nozzle, what's your best adjuvant. All of that keeps carrying on till that later season spray. You're not going to be like, oh yeah, now I'm going to switch my adjuvant. I got 3x better coverage with it when I was spraying it early, but now I'm going to switch it out. You're not going to do that. So you're going to get a lot of the benefits of it, even when our system isn't measured.
Are you guys gonna have like a list of different adjuvants that we can, I mean, kind of like, so we
Yeah.
can develop baselines? And
Yeah.
So we can kind of say, okay, even recommendations, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is not working because of the humidity. because
Exactly.
of this."
Yeah. So we're building that. Like I said, there's 1,200, 1,000 plus of these
So
things.
how do you guys go about being able to do the testing on this? Cause like, we hot load everything.
Yeah.
So the problem is that we're doing 5, 6, 7,000 gallons at a time.
Yeah.
And so,
So what we recommend is, let's say you're doing some sort of adjuvant choice, right?
Right.
You're like, hey, at the beginning of this spray, I want to figure out what my adjuvant is, right? That's a 1 hour, 2 hour investment that's going to pay back a lot over that entire spray. So instead of for that first period where you're like, hey, I want to figure out what's the best adjuvant for this, you do what Tyler did. You go buy 6 of them, you bring it back, you try them one at a time, and you see which one's working, which one's not. And now you know, right? Because now you have the decision metric. Now you go to your 5,000 acre hot load, mix it up with this thing that you know works. That's
so
how
that
you
goes
do it.
back to the humidity thing too.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
like, so
And then you're starting to see it drop off, then you start to change.
But you can do your hot loads without your adjuvants.
Yeah, you can. And then do the adjuvant last.
A lot of the adjuvants are last other than AMS, so I mean, a lot of them you could just tank mix and you spray or just have your 6 jugs and just
Yep.
mix them a batch at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
Can that be mounted on the boom rather than right behind the sprayer?
Yeah, so on case sprayers, we go on the right. So for example, on his system, it's not right behind, it's on the right side. So we can put it a different way. It really depends on what's the most convenient spot. So kind of part of this, we just did this for Kevin and I think for Kirk as well. We actually, once you sign on, a field team will come to your field, figure out where the best spot is to put it on your sprayer, build the brackets for that spot, right? So that we're putting it in the most convenient spot, it's going there, it can work, so it doesn't matter.
But they were out last week and
Yeah.
figured out all the amounts for ours.
Yeah, they're learning the joys of add-on equipment and how everybody's sprayer is different. Not every Hagen's the same, not every Miller's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
so let's just say you're, farmers in a situation where they buy it.
Yep.
At least
Yep.
either one, it just, for some reason, it just was a disaster for
Yep.
them. Then
Give it back.
Oh, okay.
You paid us $32,500.
Okay.
We said we failed you. It's fine. You don't have to keep going. But you're at $32,500. I guarantee you, at the very least, what it's going to do is help you find the right adjuvant and the right nozzle. At the very least. And beyond that, it's going to do a lot for you. But if it doesn't work, yeah, give it back. That's part
Okay,
of.
so,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I got a weird question. Let's just say, as you guys move forward, your startup company,
Yeah.
your growers,
Yep.
and let's just say you get into it, and you're constantly feeding information and updating
Yep.
everything. So let's just say, worst case scenario, something happens to your company.
Yeah.
And then in that situation,
So
just
I never actually
becomes.
got to see any of the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the case with any equipment you buy, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just with us. Like,
Right.
yeah. But that is the case. But I can tell you, we're really well funded.
Yeah. All at the same time.
well, and you guys, this isn't a one-trick pony, I guess it's nice that you guys got other things in the pipeline.
Yep.
So
We know how we can get better for this, for spreading, what we could do with your nozzles. And we have the pipeline already planned out. Like, we're already working on this stuff. We have our own sprayer now here in Indiana. We're like actively working on it to make it better. So yeah, the idea is let's make it better and give it to you. And the reason it's structured like this is we don't want you You know, even though you could buy it and still have 1 year payback, we have, some of your neighbors have already bought it outright because they were like, they saw it. We have 8 customers here in the area, and they're already like, hey, yeah, we're just gonna pay $87.5, buy it outright. We know where it's going, just gonna buy it. But the reason this program exists is you're only risking $32.5 at a time. You pay $32.5, you're gonna get all this benefit, use it for a season, do it again, do it again.
And then plus the 5,000.
Yeah, to him,
Yeah.
to Kevin. But to me, you're just paying that $32.5.
Unlike seed spray, it'd be like by synchrony now, precision, put it on your sprayer, and then you trade sprayers, you get to buy it again.
You gotta buy it again. That's not the case here. Take it off, put it on a new one. Yes, sir.
Well, I never even thought on a PWM. So if you're on 20-inch nozzle spacing on a PWM, you need to be at 40-inch boom height then.
So yeah, sort of like 40-inch
Because
boom height.
You're
Yeah.
at 40 inches. So
Yeah.
we always, I mean, because we're at 10-inch nozzle spacing on.
Yeah. So
And we-
actually, what I'm gonna
we
show
should be
you.
able, or we should be at a 20-inch minimum then.
Yeah.
Instead of 10-inch.
Yeah. So this is the thing that people didn't think about with PWM stuff when they were like, oh, we'll just switch out your PWM.
Right.
They didn't account for overlap.
Right.
Because like, I don't know how to name it. They don't actually spray people.
Right.
Like that are building these things. Like we talk to them. We're like, hey, do you think about, like we asked Deere, CNH, and AGCO, hey, what do you think about overlap? And they're like, that's a good point. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Right? And here's an example. So I showed this to Kevin. In these 2 scenarios, so that row and that row, the only difference is that your PWM was on or off. And so you can actually see it where your sprayer takes time to actually get to high coverage when your PWM's off, versus you get the good coverage immediately because your system's adapting, right? So we can show you where your PWM's actually working for you and where it's not, where you're correct in that the optimum boom height on a PWM sprayer is different than what it is on a non-PWM sprayer.
So that kind of, I don't remember if it was Horsch or Tom Wolfe up in Canada.
Yeah,
That anything above 30 inches, you have greater than 50% evaporation.
correct. And drift. So
Correct.
this is the problem where you get, and the whole sale of PWM is to say, hey, we make it more convenient.
Right.
Well, cool. You also killed my overlap and killed whatever, you know, product I have to drift if I'm supposed to be at the right height. But yeah, so Tom Wolfe was actually an inspiration for this whole thing because they were like,
Okay.
we wish we had a thing to measure coverage on the plant.
Yeah, because they do the.
They do the cards.
Yes.
I can show you why cards suck. Here. Here's the same spray on a card and a leaf. Nothing bounces off the card. So you got great coverage apparently, but you didn't.
Yeah.
And also adjuvants don't spread on cards. So you don't actually know what you got. So that's why we said, okay, we need to measure on a leaf.
And our most chemical companies and the nozzle companies are using the cards
They're
to
using the
validate
cards.
their
Yeah,
testing.
like literally AGCO did a winter conference, Precision Planning did a winter conference where they talked for an hour about spray cards. And we were like, dude, what are you talking about?
So
Yeah.
by that one slide, it looks like the PWM systems are better than just a.
I'm not gonna say that. That's just for, in that situation where they were on a short row, they couldn't get up to speed in time, and they wanted their system to adapt quicker than their standard controller could, it was better.
The PWM work better.
Yeah, but that's not the case at all times. And one of the things we do for our dealers is we help them sell you a PWM sprayer if it's actually a fit for you, right? If you have a bunch of long rows where you can afford to get up to speed, then yeah, you don't need it, maybe. Or if you're not adapting your speed and you're actually paying attention to all the gauges, your operator's like on top of it, cool, you could get away without spending 40 grand on a PWM system. Or you have a bunch of short rows, we'll show you the data to show you why you need it, and then you can make that decision with confidence.
Does Bruce Hagee have PWM on?
Brose doesn't, Hageman does, Ty Browns does.
You know, to me, this is akin to, you know, you had a yield monitor without a map, and you remember the high spots, you kind of forget the low spots and whatnot, and then we get a map on the go that changed your viewpoint of the field. Same thing with precision planning. We had to take John 3000s, and I guess crap was coming out of the back at approximately the rate we wanted it. It was good. It wasn't on top of the ground. That was a good day. You know, we didn't know, and then we got, you know, insight into things we didn't know, and all of a sudden, how many decisions have we changed based on yield maps and and Precision Planning 2020 that changed the industry. And this to me is essentially the same thing. We can learn and know what we didn't know, and it's kind of scary what the hell we didn't know. And it's also really scary the companies we've been trusting to tell us information, the chemical companies and the nozzle companies that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with, don't know shit apparently. And so
And don't ask me, ask them. Go to your chemical rep and ask them, how many drops of Liberty do you need, or on a weed, and ask them that.
There's no way the recommendations can be that broad on
No.
ounce per acre
No.
or rate per acre of active ingredient if they really knew what they're talking about. So it really makes sense that, hey, we can cut our actives back. We just gotta get them on the damn plant.
Yeah.
And how much of crappy spraying that we did that we just didn't know we didn't know. I mean, we couldn't have done any better. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
But how much of this herbicide tolerance that's come about was just because we weren't getting enough stuff on the damn plant. It wasn't that we weren't spraying. Guys cut rates. Well, cutting the rate really wasn't the problem.
Yep.
Apparently, it was that we just weren't hitting the plants enough.
And by the way, since we've talked about Liberty so much, look up Liberty Ultra, right? That's their new Liberty product, where they're saying, hey, you could go from 32 ounces an acre to 24. And the way you do that is to stop droplets bouncing off the leaf. And we give you a tank mix, pre-packaged adjuvant that does that. So it's not just me, that they already know that this is the situation. They're launching products with that in mind, and they're selling it to you with that same story of, hey, yeah, droplets on the leaf matter way more than ounces per acre. So.
Well, Ingenia had a good story too, but that didn't work out so hot. New formulation of dicamba, and that didn't really work out as they planned. So.
Yeah.
But like what you're showing there, droplets don't really matter as much as maybe how wet it makes that product and spread out.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a system, right?
It's the whole thing.
It's the whole thing. Yeah.
And that's where having the measurement is the difference in your decision making. Is just doing it blind versus doing it with the real measurement. And we encourage all our customers to check us on our stuff. Like we're like, have one guy stand outside, put a flag down, we'll show you the measurement, you pick it up and look at it. And so now you know that we're measuring the real thing.
So how quick does that happen? From your front camera to back camera, you're just measuring coverage, but like your slide on the right up there, how quick does that disbursement?
So this can take like 20 seconds. This is why we need to predict it.
Gotcha.
So what we're doing is once we get your tank mixes and stuff like that, we're actually doing test sprays to figure out how much it's spreading out and evaporating and stuff like that. With select customers, we'll even have them spray and drive backwards. So we could get data on how is this adjuvant spreading out versus this other one, right? So then we could tell you that steady state map I showed you, that prediction of how much it's actually spreading out. Yeah.
So are your cameras, one front, one back, is it taking a look at the exact same weed?
Yeah.
You have that timed out no matter what speed you're running?
Exactly. Yeah.
That camera's looking at the
exact same weed. And we basically, if you watch baseball and you've seen those things to track baseballs when the hitter hits them, we're using the same kind of software to track leaves between the front and the back. So even when the leaves are blowing around in the wind, we know which one we saw here, and even if it's tilted and sideways, we know that that's the same weed. We're saying the same leaf. So that's what we're doing, all in real time, giving you recommendations.
How about with the PWMs, we can calibrate a little higher rate behind the tires and stuff like that to account for dust?
Well, you could, but that's not something that we've done already, but you could.
Yeah, no recommendation
I don't have
or not to do that.
No, I'm not going to tell you. We're very, very, very we'll tell you stuff that we have data for, so that's stuff that we don't have data